Wilton, and myself from GARN, so we can give the approach of the rights of nature movement. So thank you everybody for being here. As you all know, the idea for today is to have a conversation, so everybody can come in and talk for 7 minutes about your approach, about your expertise, about your specific topic of how you're related to the rights of nature and to the rights of rivers, your specific experience, and then we can engage on a dialogue among all of us of how can we connect these initiatives better, what is happening right now, what is why is this such an important moment in history, and why is this dialogue so important. So we'll be here for the next hour and a half, and I want to thank you everybody for listening into this listening circle. So before the first person that I want to listen from is from Monti. Monti, you have an amazing experience with international rivers and have been promoting the idea of rights of rivers in general. So do you want to share with us for 7 minutes about your work? Thank you, Monti.
Thank you. Good morning, good evening, everybody. I am Monte Aguirre. I was born by the Magdalena River Basin in Colombia, towards the delta of the river. You know, hang around with my brother in a canoe, that kind of stuff. And my mother fished with a big net. And my father was actually somebody who worked in the national oil company. And now I am here in this beautiful place, like all the earth is beautiful. And by the Russian River watershed in California, and also most important in the land of the Pomo original peoples. So I salute all of you. Thank you so much. And yes, I am a part of the International Rivers team. Very proud of it. I've been working with International Rivers, so we've been together for about 22 years, I believe. And so we've seen a lot. Our organization is 35 years old or so, and we've seen a lot because our mission is to protect rivers and communities, especially from large infrastructural projects, dams, waterways, things of that sort. And it's really interesting to see how one thing takes you to another, like for detaining, stopping bad projects that were like dams that were going to halt the path of the salmon, of the pirarucu. Actually, I don't know I think that's a migratory species, but all the migratory species, anadromous, canadromous, and so forth. And to see how, you know, more than 80 million people have been displaced, to see how many rivers in this lifespan have been cut from going to the ocean, and also the decimation of many species, aquatic, from freshwater ecosystems. So a lot has happened, and many countries, they become a focus. Is sort of part of what I was saying before. It was because all the very visible, very, you know, the impacts that we can feel very deeply. So I believe that's why rights of rivers have become a very important piece in this movement. And also because there has been a movement to protect rivers. We have been focusing on stopping dams, let's say, and some people have focused on pollution. And now we're starting to come together. And what is bringing us together is this rights of rivers movement. And when we talk about movement, and we're talking about how transformative this approach is, we really have to start thinking about it. And I'm sure all of you have, but we can do it now together. It's what does transformative, not necessarily what it means, but what are we talking about? What does it require? One of the main things that I think about, which many of you would recognize, is the difficulties in the implementation of the sentences or the judgments, right? Our decisions made by the courts, because those laws, those policies, environmental policies, are not necessarily in tune with these, with this, with this, let's say, philosophical, or let's say with this stand, that the rights of nature, rights of rivers brings to us. So that, to me, is one of the things that needs to happen. Our laws and policies to be more adequate to respond or to work with decisions in the court, and all of it going towards the real protection of nature, which includes us, as I said. And also in terms of movement, what I see is that, this is actually an incredible moment. And, with all my heart going to how difficult it has been, especially this last year. But it also has brought us together, and it has sparked in all of us, I think, or many of us, the need that we need to continue to raise consciousness. And I know things start to get a little bit difficult in terms of how we talk about things, because we are going into different realms. We are going beyond what we see, what we touch, and that's another area that I think it's really important. So we have the area of movements, we have this area of basically an elevation of consciousness, and I'm just going to put it out there like that. We also see all these other movements like climate, with gender, feminists, etc. And I think water, rights of water, although we generally talk about people's rights of water, but how about the rights of the water? So those are some of the things that need some polishing, some more thought, and how important it is to also to examine our language. And because embedded in language is culture, is what we think, right? It's our vision. So it's how important it is, very important to also look at that language and how we express ourselves, and the meaning of words being so powerful. So that's another area of that we
work, but to connect and to know how we're doing this and why we're doing this together, and to get to know each other. So thank you so much for those beautiful words, Monti. We're going to continue with Shrishtee Bajpai, if I'm pronouncing it right, Bajpai. Shrishtee, can you help me pronounce your last name? And if you can also tell us, Bajpai, there we go. And if you can also share with us about your work and what is happening with that side of the world.
Sure, thanks Natalia for organizing this and having me and others here. So I'm Shrishtee, I'm joining you from India, and I will be sharing a short PPT, just easier to talk. Can you see my screen? Okay, great. Well, there's lots that Monti has already said, and I think realized here for India and also the rest of South Asia. And I have my colleagues joining, Ayesha and Sharif, who can add so much more. So the crisis of rivers in South Asia is marked by a lot of things, ranging from pollution to industrial, domestic, damming, diversions, river interlinking projects, sand mining, privatization of rivers. There's also lots of conflicts between the neighboring countries on the sharing of waters and what one country does to the river, and how it affects the access for the communities downstream. Climate change and encroachments, which we see so much more, and how our societies are constructed, which further complicates the situation, which is basically the underlying inequalities that we live in, which curtails not just river rights but also human rights. So it's an interesting crisis that unfolds also because of the kind of societies we live in. But to contextualize for rivers, and I think this contextualization is not just for for here in India or the South Asia, but also across the world, that we know that our current laws and policies have instead of actually curtailing the destruction, have been used as means to sanction environmental destruction. And with the whole ecological crisis and also the COVID crisis, we do realize, or at least a large section is beginning to realize, that we have to fundamentally think about our dominant systems, be it political, economic, and our environmental systems, but they need to fundamentally change. And so from this whole extractive, colonial, property oriented mindset to a very different one that possibly this movement is hinting or signaling towards, and something that the communities definitely have been, a lot of indigenous and local communities have definitely been articulating in their worldviews and cosmologies, and just by being just in their in their daily practices, in their being, in their living, of the sense of reciprocal, interdependent, relational, and a pluriversal relationship that they have with the rest of nature. And something that this picture depicts beautifully of how we are as much part of constitutes a river, and just doesn't hold for a river, also it holds for many ecosystems actually. River is gets more complicated, or as Natalia was saying, that it is so much more focused because it's an ecosystem, it's a civilization, as so many people have called, and so that constitutes a river. But I think as still a very it's a confusion whether we include the species, whether we include the catchment areas, the forests, the tributaries, how big it becomes. People have been arguing for moisture in the air as well. So then where do we start and where do we end? And is the legal personhood the right tool? I think there's lots of discussion around that. What other tools exist? Are we getting into the whole anthropocentric kind of a worldview? Can we do something else? But the legal systems are limited. How would such rights be implemented? As Monty was saying, I think there's so much and so much discussion of what we need, but there's so little that we have been able to talk about in terms of implementations. What kind of methods have been used in different parts of the world? What can we learn from each other? I think there's some efforts being made towards that, but still there is extreme ambiguity around how this will be implemented, and a lot of things have actually been not taken can't be taken forward because there's very little clarity on that. And then what implications do these rights have on the communities living along uh, on with them, and also our relationship between humans and the rest of nature, with societies like that in India, where there's so much complexities. This is an actually a very important discussion to get into, of how does it impact the relationship. And then, of course, something of the implementation process for across boundary rivers. Now, most rivers, as we know, nature doesn't follow nation state boundaries. It is contiguous. How do we implement these rights? How do we actually ensure that these rights are realized in their true potential? If, say, suppose in Pakistan, Indus River is granted rights, and in India and China they continue to build dams, what does it do to the river? It doesn't really ensure those rights. So some of these questions were concerning for us, and a dialogue was organized in March 2020, last year. And some of these questions were discussed, some of these thoughts were discussed. And one question, we won't get into the details of this, but one question, the first one of what is a river, was something that you can see on the screen, came out collectively through this dialogue that was organized at the South Asian level. And for a movement like this, it is important, and it is important for us who people who are keen on this movement, that we are not just talking about movement in seclusion, or just about environment, which usually happens with environmental discourse. We are talking about questioning the fundamentals. So until we question the fetishness to growth kind of development model, we will not be able to truly guarantee or grant these rights, so whatever we have in mind. So hence we have to question the role of communities that doesn't empower local communities to be custodians of ecosystems, must be questioned. So we cannot spiritual and also ecological. And something that my colleagues are also here, as an alliance that has emerged post dialogue, that is trying to unpack some of these questions, look at some of these concerns, and see what it really means for a region like South Asia, which is also very complex because of so many things. And possibly Ayesha or Sharif can talk more about this. But that's where, as a collective and the group, we are arriving at. So yeah, thank you from my side, and hopefully we can get into unpacking some of these questions more when we
Perfect.
do the dialogue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shrishtee. And you have already raised a lot of like the good questions that we want to engage in that conversation. Like, is the legal personhood the right tool? The implementation process. How do we break out of this development model? I think those are very important questions that we want to answer all together. If these movements and what we're doing is actually taking us towards the right path. So thank you for that great introduction and for telling us what is happening in that part of the world. Grant, we're gonna listen. Grant, you have 7 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Grant Wilson. I am a co-director at Earth Law Center, and we are a team of legal professionals who advocate for new Earth-centered legal paradigms, including the rights of nature. I live in Boulder, Colorado in the United States on the occupied homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute people. I live within the Boulder Creek watershed, and I think one of the reasons, currently I'm fighting for the rights of the Boulder Creek watershed, and I encourage everyone to consider and advocate for the rights of the watershed and local rivers that are within your own home. Meaning, if we pass them in one place, we can pass them in another place, and that are scalable. So maybe we pass something locally and it can be elevated to state, national, and international levels. Some of the places we've focused on the rights of rivers specifically include the United States. I mentioned working within my own community, and then also working with various partners such as Nez Perce tribal leaders on rights of the Snake River. And then in Mexico, in Latin America, where we have a lot of active rights of river cases, especially with partners such as Monti at International Rivers, who you heard with. And then in Europe, in Africa, working on rights of the River Ethiop with the River Ethiop Trust Foundation and others, and world. And I think the Rights of Rivers Declaration embodies that. And it also talks about the right to be free from pollution, as well as the specific rights that apply to watersheds, which really is what we're talking about here. So I encourage everyone to check that out. I also wanted to highlight a couple areas of the rights of rivers that I think are interesting for folks who are active in the field to talk about, and might be areas to talk about today. Once you establish rights for a river, that's just the very beginning. Just like you can establish, human rights through a declaration, but unless you enforce those rights, they're not going to be too effective in practice. And so some of the areas I think that we can talk about for enforcement and implementation of the rights of rivers are, how do you give rivers a voice in government? For example, if there's, a local community and they have city hall hearings, how can you make sure that rivers give testimony and give input into local policies that impact their well-being? How can you ensure that the rights of rivers are what areas of development are just no-go zones from a rights of river perspective, are just completely incompatible with this viewpoint, no matter what mitigation happens, such as dam projects? Should we all rally around the reality that dam projects always violate the rights of rivers? How can we modernize our current laws to embrace a whole ecosystem health perspective? In other words, many environmental laws treat rivers as being the water between. And then how do we hold polluters and financial institutions accountable to restore ecosystems and rivers in particular to health? How do we fight back against this right to pollute if you have a permit? And then specifically with guardianship, I think this is something that's really exciting. In the United States over the last year, we've had a reckoning with social justice, with rights for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, for trying to decolonize the legal system and begin to address some of the many harms that have been ongoing over the last several hundred years, and to heal together. And so I'm thinking about how, the rights of rivers movement can support, social justice, restorative justice, equity, diversity in our institutions. And I think, guardianship bodies are a great place to really promote diversity, inclusion, to make sure we're including the voices of indigenous peoples, local communities, to make sure that there's, not just the same voices that we've heard in Western government kind of steal the stage for decades, but to use legal guardianship bodies, which serve as the voice of nature, as a place to empower communities and to elevate voices that haven't always been elevated. And so there's a lot you can do to really make sure that they're equitable.
Right to flow of the rivers. I think the most important part of being here all together today is to meet, to know about everybody's initiatives, and to know how to use different assets like the textbook you've just mentioned and the declaration. So thank you so much for that. Continuing with Grant, we're going to continue with Sharif Jamil. Sharif, it's a pleasure to meet you. We haven't met in person yet, but we've been meaning to meet each other for a long time. And I think that it's quite important that we establish this kind of spaces to not only to hear from your experiences from what I say the other side of the world, but to meet and to connect and to work together. So welcome, Sharif, and we'll be listening from you. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Natalia. Thanking everybody. And first of all, I must be paying my gratitude for including me in this very important talk. Thank you. I'm sharing some slides as you can follow my discussion better. Is that visible? I need to go very fast. Well, today we are discussing about rights of the rivers, and rights of the rivers in Bangladesh means a little bit different than others. That I will explain through the court verdicts, quoting court verdicts, but let me start with how Bangladesh is and how much it is important to protect the water bodies and rivers in this country. If you see Bangladesh, Bangladesh is basically called the drain of Asia, it's the part of the largest active delta in the world, and Ganges and Brahmaputra made this land actually. You can see how big catchment area discharges to the Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean through Bangladesh. So it's a huge, important area in terms of river management and the other things of this land. So I don't want to waste much time here. The weather pattern of Bangladesh is basically during monsoon we get 80% of water, and during winter we get 20% of water. That's why Bangladesh cannot be saying a water abundant country. Sometimes we must recognize the scarcity of water for reasons. I will try to explain it a little bit more in the coming slides. So basically it's delta, so rivers made this land, and all those rivers are basically depending on 4 major river systems. And if you see this slide here, you can see we have 3 major river systems coming from upstream countries and 1 internal river system, which is at the right side cornerfully we see. But this is very small and river system. This is Brahmaputra river system, and this is Borak and Meghna river system. So basically all the rivers of this country are depending on these major 3 river systems coming from the upstream countries. This is very important to understand the rights of the rivers when we are saying rivers as living entity. So we basically did not know how many rivers we had before the recent study from National River Conservation Commission. They have recorded 776 rivers identifiable by names by far. So we can hope that the rights of the Dhaka rivers, how those are tormented. Let me tell you about the structure of the river. In 2009, our High Court came up with a verdict when the rivers were so much degrading and so much of encroachment were going on. So in 2009, High Court came up with a verdict and instructed government to actually put up demarcation pillar for Dhaka rivers. to protect the rivers. And then actually it explained also how legally what it should be the structure for a river. We have that from 1966 Port Act that a river will have three particular area, which is riverbed. Riverbed is basically the flow during the lean period, and then there will be a foreshore. Foreshore will be the from the low water mark, from the high water mark during the spring time. Three physical areas, and where the river is so in terms of river area and demarcation that was instructed by the High Court actually was not following properly. So faulty demarcation pillars coming up, and the rivers around Dhaka. Actually, a photograph here. You can see when demarcating the river area, the encroachment should be evicted, and as the encroachment cannot go again, walkways right on the river bed. This is the river bed, and these are the encroachment. So basically, the right of the rivers was further violated when they were violating the court verdict. Actually, they did not put up the demarcation pillar properly. So Dhaka rivers lost their structure. And in terms of pollution, if you see the industrialization around the city, actually were not going on properly. There is no basically zoning system. Now there are coming up some special economy zones, but if you see the garment industries, textile, what I mean, if you see tannery, these are all around Dhaka city and polluting the Dhaka rivers tremendously, openly, and years after years. So these are some of the how the rights of the rivers are violated here. And this is another slide I can show, as I was telling you about the importance of transboundary river systems. For our salt industry is there. 70% salt are coming from that particular area, and they are setting up huge industrial installations there, including coal-based power plants, which is called Matarbari coal plant. You know, coal plants are very, very polluting. However, that Matarbari coal plant and other industrialization in Matarbari require an approach road, and they are making the approach road completely filling up a river called Kohelia. You see, a river is just completely filled up and made up a road, which is a foreign investment are also there. Maybe Bangladesh has a governance problem. Maybe our legal systems are not that efficiently effective yet. But how about Japan? They should have responsibility also when they are investing their money or with their money where rivers are being filled up and making road. And recently, like day before yesterday actually, 25th May, I got this photograph today. That Matarbari coal plant under construction area is discharging pollutant to the canal that is going to the Kohelia River. So with these examples, I tried to underscore one very reality in our country is in all terms, every right, any right of the rivers can be violated, are being violated here in this country. But our legal systems, they are all very good. There are all protections there, including the Water Act 2013, that also says rivers right means the right to flow. Whatever they are on the way to its flow is illegal. So these are their problem is implementation, short term, mid term, and long term, where we need inclusion of the local people, inclusion of the national experts, and of course, our development partners and global community. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you, Sharif. And you raised very important points, especially the points related to the implementation. That is our most important task, how hard it is to implement these amazing advances that we have in law. And I wish that we had like an hour to listen to everybody, because we have such amazing presentations and such amazing people, but we have to keep it short to be able to listen to everybody and to engage in the conversation. So thank you, Sharif, for sharing. And now we're going to listen to Ayesha de Souza. And we have Min here too, but Min, we can engage later on also with the conversation. But Ayesha, we'll also like to hear from you. And sorry that I'm keeping you guys short, but we want to engage in a conversation. Hopefully one day we'll meet in person and have more time to talk to each other. Ayesha, go ahead.
Thanks, everyone, and thank you for having me on this panel. In addition to the Rights of Rivers South Asia Alliance that I'm currently working with, I also represent International Rivers in their South Asia program, and I'm based currently in New Delhi in India. I just wanted to start off by saying a few weeks ago, I received messages from my landlord saying that there'll be a water shortage, and this is the capital of India, New Delhi. And just to put into context that we're facing water shortages already, and inspiring to see how they're doing everything they can to kind of keep that last stretch of the river flowing freely, and hopefully campaigning for a river sanctuary in that area. And so I kind of wanted to just set the stage for us to know that there are many river movements and river fights across the region. And of course, as my colleague mentioned about, the courts and the judgments that exist in the South Asian region, another question to ask are, are the courts our answer? Because as we see in the region, we're up against governments that are hell-bent on watering down environmental protection laws that exist in the country. So whether it's for rivers or forests or anything else, we're seeing these laws being watered down, not just in general, during the pandemic, when people are in their homes and they can't come out on the streets to protest. And we're seeing this happen across the region, especially in India, where you're seeing the research projects in the midst of a global pandemic. And so that's something to really think about and highlight when we talk about what it means to implement these court judgments, and how, and the question to ask is also, is there political will? How much do civil society organizations and movements play a role when we're up against this kind of constant changing of the laws and the systems that exist in the region? So that's just a little bit about tackling bureaucracy and implementation and watering down of environmental protection. And I know I don't want to repeat what Sharif said, but I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about how focusing on transboundary rivers is extremely crucial. And so I'll reiterate a point that he said, that and that Shrishtee mentioned earlier, that even if a river is granted rights in one country, what does it mean for that river upstream or downstream or wherever it may be? And that's something that the Rorsa Alliance is really focusing on, and really looking at these transboundary rivers, whether it be the Tista in India, whether it be the Karnali in Nepal, and so many more rivers. And so I think I don't want to take too much more time, but I want to just end by talking about a post-COVID world and a post-COVID recovery, where we're going to see countries trying to ramp up their development and ramp up and put forth these large development projects. And how will the movement for rights of nature and the rights of rivers kind of stand up to post-COVID recovery, where we're talking about them wanting to move forward with building up their economies. And so I'll just end there. I don't want to kind of repeat too much of what's already been said, but if you'd like to know more about the rights of rivers, then please reach out to us and we'd be happy.
Really interested, because I have been a long-time environmentalist. For the last 50 years, I got involved in Japan, where the pollution was horrific, in 1971, and wrote the first holistic analysis of the Japanese environmental crisis that's still the gold standard for understanding what happened in Japan in terms of the nationwide pollution crisis. So I came to Ecuador with Richard, and we had no intention of buying land here, but we were spiritually hijacked by the cosmos, sort of this divine communication that something wanted to happen here on this land, and we were the stewards. So that was 2007, and bought the land in 2007, started to build what we now call the Garden of Paradise, because our idea is to create a Garden of Paradise. The gate, when we came back from the United States, we saw that they were widening the road, tripling the width of the road that came out to, because it was a very bad road before. But then we began seeing every time the provincial government's building crew came near the river, they were dumping their debris into the river, and this was not a good thing. So I talked with the people, and they said, oh, well, we've always done it this way. And I kept trying to find who was in charge. And then when they came out to our land, we have over a mile of riverfront. We have 300.
Norie, stop listening to you. Is that the case for everybody? It stopped for a little bit. Can you repeat that last minute or second?
Okay. We had bought a large piece of land here, 350 acres, 140 hectares, to save it for the animals. And the southern border of our property, over a mile, so about 1.5 kilometers, is river, the Vilcabamba River. And so when the provincial government's building crew came down near us, they started dumping the debris in the river. And we saw that it was blocking the river in half in some places. And again, I tried to talk with them. I went to Loja many times to talk with people in the provincial government, trying to find who was in charge. And they would send me from one office to another office to another office, and then back to the same office. And then we had a storm happen that just destroyed it. It really destroyed some. And when we came back, not too long after that, so they never do this again, either here or in other places. And he said, well, how do you want to do that? What kind of legal process? And I said, well, I remember hearing in Quito, it was from Nati, hearing about this new clause, the set of clauses in the Ecuadorian constitution about the rights of nature. We want to use that one. And our lawyer said, well, you won't get any money for that. And I said, let me check with Richard, but I think he'll agree. And I explained to Richard, and we said, we don't care. It's the principle. We want them to stop, and we want to set a precedent. So the first law is an act of nature. And I said to Carlos, our lawyer, nature was ably assisted by the provincial government in destroying the river. We will appeal. So we appealed, and then in end of March 2011, we found that we had just won the first lawsuit in Ecuador and in the world, defending the rights of nature and being the voice of the river in the Ecuadorian court system. So a mining concession upstream, just immediately upstream from us. So it was kind of like, it didn't really mean a whole lot that we had won this lawsuit. They were still trying to damage the river, and it was all for economic gain. So fortunately, I'm a longtime environmental organizer, and I figured out, did a lot of investigation, found they had fraudulent permits, fraudulent everything, and that the person whose name was on the mining concession was the son of the people who owned the land. And so I remember that after 2 years and bringing in the ombudsman, the Defensor del Pueblo, whom I met again at an event that Natalia was organizing, with his help, he was very helpful. He was the only one of 8 inspections where he actually produced a report. So there's a lot of is really, really happening. I've come to the conclusion that what is needed is a much bigger game plan, and through that have basically been working with people around the world on the redesign of the economic and financial reward and incentive system, because we need to make it more profitable to have clean, free-flowing rivers with healthy waterways, healthy life cycles of the plants and animals in the rivers and the oceans. We need to make it more profitable to have a tree planted and protected to keep standing rather than cutting it down, because the whole economic system, the way it is set up now and for the last 5,000 years, treats nature like a market basket of goodies, and the people who are rich and powerful can pull out what they want whenever they want. It's the economic and financial system. I've done a lot of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Norie, so much, and thank you for setting up that amazing precedent for you. Thank you, and Richard, for doing that. And I wanted to let you guys know that if you share the links, as Monti, you have shared them, Jose, you might help us to put those links also in the Zoom chat, so people who are listening can also access to those extra bits of information. And to close up this session, before we can talk about rights of nature very quickly, because we want to engage in the conversation, I want to invite Zoe Lujik. Zoe will be talking to us about the Balkan rivers. So Zoe, I know that you don't have a camera, but you have a nice picture of the river. So go ahead, Zoe.
Many thanks, Nati, for inviting me to this fantastic panel. And after all these speakers, a very, very difficult act to follow, I have to say. All these amazing things that people are doing and working on, just, you know, makes me happy, makes me positive. And in today's world, that's much needed. Yes, I do apologize for not having my camera. Unfortunately, my laptop is not up to having both Zoom and camera, but the picture of the river that you see is one of the rivers that we are working on trying to protect it from further damage, because it's already been damaged in so many ways. And I will be talking about it a bit later on. Now, first to present myself. My name is Zoe. I come from, well, I was born in Yugoslavia, now it's Serbia, but basically from the Balkan of the world, and it's utterly beautiful part of the world. Unfortunately, nature there is tremendously endangered, and there's an onslaught going on so many levels. Rivers being at the moment being really most in danger from quite various activities, everything from pollution to extractive activities like sand or banks being destroyed for so-called tourism, all sorts of stuff. But the latest scare that we have there, and it's a big scare, are the so-called small dams. Now, the small dams, they're only small in terms of the electricity output, but they are very big in terms of damage. So I'm going to be sharing with you some pictures of our rivers to start off with. So these are, let me just move this. Okay, these are some of the rivers that you can see when you come to the Balkans in various countries. For example, this one is in Montenegro. This one is in Serbia. This is in Bosnia, I think. This is another one in the process of being built on no less than 84 rivers. Now, in such a small country, that is a devastating number. So this is what you end up with. This is I mean, they're called small dams, but look at the destruction they cause. Look at how much damage that causes on this one river. This is what it looks like from a close-up. And you see how much concrete there is poured, and there's basically no river right after the dam. There's nothing coming out there because everything goes into a pipe, which you can't always see. Look at the damage there also. So on the left-hand side, you have a little bit of river that you can see here. And then on the right-hand side, there is absolutely no river. Again, another thing that the world is striving towards, especially in Europe, which is very, very ambitious. And they tell that they are keep increasing the proportion of renewable energy as a portion of entire energy produced in Europe from 20% now to, I don't know, they're going towards 50% release carbon dioxide. And these dams do release a lot of carbon dioxide. It doesn't mean that it's environmentally friendly, because you cannot try and prevent one ecocide, i.e. climate change and everything that brings with it, by committing another ecocide, like these dams. I mean, it's called from the fact that what they're doing is actually damaging nature. And I don't think they even care, which is why when our European hub was established about 2 years ago, one of the first projects that I suggested was the Tribunal for the Rights of the Aquatic Ecosystems of Europe, where I really wanted to showcase what is happening to our rivers, and especially in relation to so-called renewable energy, and to then go with the verdict, which we will have in September. It will be read out on the sidelines of the IOCN Congress, to go to relevant European institutions and basically say that what they're doing is against the rights of nature to exist, thrive, and evolve naturally, and especially when it comes to rivers, because no rivers, no water, no life. It's as simple as that. We cannot have this in the 21st century, but also a lot of laws as we've already heard from previous speakers, talk only about how to regulate pollution, how to regulate destruction, and how much of that destruction to be allowed, rather than being concerned about the right of those beings that are in the nature, and by those beings, I mean also humans, to life. Use power of the turbine. So that's the big problem that we are facing in the Balkans. Basically, disappearance of rivers, and in Serbia alone, there's almost 100 of them that have been killed like this. So here you have this beautiful small waterfall on one of the rivers that we are fighting for within the tribunal case, and here there is hardly any water flowing, and that's something that you can see throughout the Balkans, and it's really took me when I talk about it is fish. Now, but fish don't. They live in those rivers. One of the criteria for building these dams is called biological minimum. Not biological, it's that fish should have a path through which they can, now who on earth can swim through that? There's not even water in there. Look at this. Most of them are completely dry, and they're just there for show. So you can see here, again, another one. Where is fish going to go? There's absolutely nowhere for fish to go. So fish are suffering hugely, and one of the main subjects of our tribunal case, which Grant will know because he is our lawyer in the case, are fish and the rights for fish to basically have their home healthy. So one of the asks that we are going to be asking relevant, not just the Serbian and Balkan governments, but mainly European Union, is not just to ban immediately all these small dams, but also to restore all the rivers to full health, not least because of the fish. So they can, not just fish, but other mollusks and other small fauna that lives in those rivers, because most of them are endemic. There is about 69 different species which are endemic just to this area, and they are all highly endangered. So for their own benefit, we are asking for this whole area to be restored as soon as possible. And that's going to be, together with restorative justice, a very, very big part of our asks. So this is, what we started with, and this is one of the rivers that we are fighting for on the mountain of Koponik, River Yoshanica. And it's a small mountain river. It looks much bigger than it is. It looks much bigger on the picture than it actually is, because I was there 2 years ago to see it. It's a small mountain river. It's hardly bigger than a stream, but this is what it looks like today. So, this is why I jumped with both and all this thinking and political and legal and judicial dictating, while they sit up there in their parliaments, in their offices, and they think they're doing a great job because they're building these dams and they're producing so-called green energy, and these small dams produce hardly any energy, literally ridiculously small amount of energy, but it's because of the subsidies that the government is giving the owners of the dams. And for a small, relatively small environment,
is so harsh, and we're still against this model of development that is really going against nature. And what we are doing as GARN is pretty much to try to get all of us together and to connect these different movements and to understand what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, how can we do what we want faster to be able to connect. We were fortunate enough to be able to recognize rights of nature 12 years ago in Ecuador, but in spite of that, we have not been able to stop big scale mining and oil development, and we have not been able to guarantee the rights of nature. So I think that what we want to know now and talk among each other is like, what can we do then? What we have been doing as GARN, and I see that Juan Sebastian is here, for example, from GARN Latin America. We have Rafael Iturralde here, who's also supporting us to help with the different hubs, is that we have started these hubs, thematic and regional hubs, to be able to engage. And for example, Zoe was talking about the European hub, to engage people from different places and different topics. Shrishtee, for example, is working with us in the academic hub, and to be able to engage everybody according to their expertise on rights of nature and how to implement them and how to educate more people about the urgent need to recognize that nature is a living entity and that it has rights. But I want to pass to the dialogue and listen to you guys on like how we make this happen even faster? How do we actually, is it enough to recognize personhood, as Shrishtee was posing that question? How do we promote a bigger implementation of these laws and these successes that you have all been able to do in your different countries? So I want to open up this dialogue for all of us to engage on how we do this together. Anybody want to start? You can raise your hand or just open your mic.
Well, I can say a few words because as a facilitator of the European Hub, that's exactly what we are doing in Europe. We are all gathering together for ecological justice. So, for example, in our case, we will all be, having at the end of this tribunal a verdict read on the side of institutions which are either at fault or which govern this kind of process. So. Which I think for our case, for us in Europe, is a good thing, because we have this, governing one governing body, which is European Union, which has a lot of influence. So at least my modus operandi is find the pressure point, find a body that is most likely to act, most likely to have most influence.
To spot and map everything that is happening, that is so important, because I think that when we realize that everything is happening so fast and that so many people are doing it, then we have more strength to do it together. I think I had some, Norie, you have your hand up?
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, I really would urge people to watch my TEDx talk, because I think there's some really useful material in there for all of us in terms of the larger context in which we're working. Many scientists, in fact, a growing number, are saying that we're moving into the 6th mass extinction event, and that we're destroying the biosphere more rapidly than we're regenerating it, and that the last mass extinction event killed off about 75% of life on Earth, and it took between 185,000 years and 2 to 3 million years for the Earth to recuperate and to begin to generate and be populated again with new life forms. So what I said in my TEDx talk is, and I'll repeat it here because it's really pivotal, it's a really good idea to avoid mass extinction events. And what I have found in talking, what I would urge everyone to consider is, see if you can meet the children or the grandchildren of the leader. That's a hugely powerful leverage point. And then also, I have found over the years, by going in and interviewing people in positions of power and asking them questions that take them down into their core thinking, their core assumptions, I've seen miracles happen. And I would be very happy to give a little training program for this group on the interview process that I use. It's really, really, really powerful. I've been using it for 50 years, and I've got step by step through their assumptions that they're making. And then you say, oh, do you have children or do you have grandchildren? When they begin to, in their own minds, to put together in a new way in their heads what they're doing. The other thing to keep in mind is there are only about 3,000 people on the earth who are basically promoting these very, very destructive practices at the core with huge, huge amounts of money. And the rest of us, which is over what now? And if we were to start to do things differently and to come up with a new economic system with our own reward and incentive system, our own money, which cryptocurrency now allows very nicely, I think that we could change things quite rapidly. The dollar right now, for example, which is the reserve currency in the world and is being challenged on a number of fronts, the dollar has been there's so many dollars that have been
the rivers. And of course, it's foreign interests going on here for the joint ventures and other industrialization related activities. So we need global community also to think green and to change their mindset in terms of assisting developing countries like us. Thank you.
That's a very important point, Sharif. And I see some comments also from Juan Sebastian in the chat. Liliana wasn't able to join us today to talk about the Atrato River, but maybe Juanse, you want to share a little bit about Colombia. And I think that this is like the most important part of this listening circle is to get to know each other, because we cannot travel, but this is an amazing way to connect and get to know each other. So Juanse, do you want to introduce yourself and a little bit of Colombia?
Well, I excuse my English. I am Sebastián, I'm Bogota, nature. In Colombia, the case of like have almost 10 rivers declared as rights with rights or rivers with rights. This is just an judge process. In the constitutions, in our constitution, there is not the rights of nature, but there is a constitution with very important topics about the ecological and cultural rights. So the Rio Trato was the first one, but there is other rivers in the country very important, like Magdalena River, Cauca rivers. There is the most problematic affectation is by hydroelectrics, and there is a few mega minery, and these sentences have many problems to get implemented, and there is other ecosystems in Colombia declared as subject of rights, like Paramos, the Amazonian jungle, and other ecosystems in local states. And we are creating the first educational program in rights of nature here in Colombia. Well, there is some of the news here.
On the rights of nature, where we can all be connecting. So we'll keep on this conversation on, and I'm really grateful to meet you all and to do these connections. We can keep on the conversation by email, but the most important thing was to get connected and to share to the world the differences and the similarities about the rights of nature movement and the rights of rivers, that is pretty much the same, but it is pretty much how nature is speaking through different places. Some places are not able to change their constitution as we did, but it's easier to do it through like the recognition of rivers. But we're doing exactly the same thing through different channels, and that is exactly what nature does through us. So I really want to thank you all for your comments, for your participation, for your experiences, for your commitment for nature. And I really hope that we can keep on communicating. We have each other's emails. We have been able to broadcast these on Facebook so that more people can learn about these, because education is the key for success. So I want to thank you all. And I don't know if somebody has a closing comment, or we can wrap up. We're okay? Perfect. Thank you so much. Then I really appreciate your time, and we'll keep talking. Thank you again for this second listening circle.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Nati.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.
The recording has stopped.